All right, I'm with XFL Insider Mike Mitchell on the program to give us the latest. Yes, the last time we talked, we were talking about Fox and maybe Disney, and people were really interested in that. Now we have The Rock, Danny Garcia, Redbird Capital, and we have a timeline of spring to 2022 is when the season would start. But I wanted to point out something that you had in your article that recently published about June timeframe. So I guess what are you hearing about that?
Well, several people reached out to me in the lead up to last week's announcement that the league would be relaunching in 2022. And several different sources reached out to me to indicate that the hiring process for a 2022 season would begin in June. Now, some people indicated May as well. In terms of that, and it would give the league, presumably, if the league plans on launching play in February of 2022, it would give the league about an 8-month window to get all their teams lined up and working full steam ahead towards the 2022 season. So that's the timeline that you would figure as well, that would be the timeline that the league would be having player workouts, tryouts, the draft, or whatever player allocation system will be put in place. Football operations going to be hired to head up that department. We're in the early stages. I'd hate to term it as a skeleton crew, but it is at the moment. It's Dwayne and Danny's ideas, Redbird Capital's ideas in terms of finances, and Jeffrey Pollack and his team right now planting the seeds that are going to need to grow in the coming months.
So June is the timeline. So so would that be presidents, coaches, that kind of thing in June, or would you get presidents?
I think
coaches
you'd get. I think
that?
Those would be the first. Those would be the first things to drop in terms of you'd have to set up the business infrastructure of each team, and that includes having fully staffed front offices, and then right now there's a lot of, as been documented on our site at XFL News Hub. Josh Davis has done a lot of work in this department in terms of the legal side of things. There's a lot of legal wrangling going on in terms of setting up venues and building up partnerships for the league moving forward. And I think, once you have a lot of that set in place and an idea of where the teams are going to play when the 2022 season happens, then you can kind of set up the infrastructure of each individual team. It appears at the moment, and it looks like it, that we're going to have the 8 original XFL teams. Where the venues are set up is not quite clear at the moment, although some of the previous venues that were used for the 2020 season appear to be on the table. We'll see how that transpires. But there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of wrangling, a lot of stuff that needs to be done in order to head towards that pathway. And the 2022 window gives the league a little bit more time to do that correctly.
So that's included. So you're saying you don't think, basically, what about a commissioner? So a commissioner, would that come in June, or?
That could be one of the first announcements that we get in terms of who's going to be heading up the football operations department. As I laid out a few minutes ago, you kind of have like I said, I don't like to use the term skeleton crew, but that's really kind of like what's going on right now in terms of, Jeffrey Pollack's division right now is smaller. That's obviously going to grow over time. And then you've got, of course, the owners and their support staff and what have you. But we're a long ways away from that. So you would think that a lot of the football operations hires would take place over the course of the next few months, weeks upcoming, because that's going to be important. If there is a commissioner role, who's going to be heading that, and then who's going to hire the key hires in the league's front office in terms of scouting and all of that. So those are important hires. Those are going to be just like as we witnessed during 2018. Once Oliver Luck was hired, Oliver Luck hired Sam Schwartzstein, and then Eric Galco and Optimum Scouting were brought on. And then those were the first, big football hires, so to speak, before even, locations and then coaches and everything else were hired, team presidents as well. So that's the order of things. So the football operations side would be the first important section, for lack of a better term, that the XFL would need to fill in order, because a new commissioner, a new head of football operations will decide where the league goes in terms of how they allocate players, how they set up a free agent system, how they draft, all of that.
Yeah. So really, fans just really need to be like, hey, we're really not going to hear any major hirings until June. But then it seems like June is in effect what the offseason would have been this year, of June
Right.
2021.
I think June is more of locking in all the teams in terms of their staffs and everything like that. I think we'll start to hear about other hires way before that, because I think, like, for example, Vince McMahon announced the relaunch of the XFL in January of 2018. It wasn't until June of that year that Oliver Luck was hired. Once he was hired, it was a long time frame between Oliver Luck being hired and then football coaching staffs being put in place and everything else. So I think we're going to get a commissioner announcement way before the June timeline. The June is more, May or June is more about locking in team coaching staffs, front offices, staff members, etc. However, the ticketing plan is, everything else like that. So, so there's a lot that goes on in between. But I think one of the key hires is coming soon. I don't think the league is going to wait until June to announce who's heading their football operations and scouting department, etc.
Gotcha. Now, as far as the players go, is it still the same idea that players, like Cardell Jones and Josh Johnson, even though this is way in advance,
Right,
would still be the quarterbacks of their teams, and players who played with, the Battlehawks, they are basically still Battlehawk players? I think they're just going to start everything from scratch.
That's yet to be determined, but you would think that the league would want to bring back some of its more recognizable players from the 2020 season. So if Josh Johnson is game in 2022 or anyone else, you would think that because the same 8 teams are returning, and then presumably and hopefully some of those coaching staffs, June Jones and others, return along with the league as well, then there would probably be some type of this would have to be determined by the commissioner, but in terms of like a player rights system where teams get to claim the players that were previously on their team, because now we're looking at a 2022 timeline rather than 2021, there could be some changes and alterations in that. We don't know. Whoever heads up the football department, we don't know if that individual is going to go for a territorial system. We don't know how so those things are yet to be determined, but you would like to see some of the Battlehawks' most prominent players return to St. Louis. And likewise, like someone like a Josh Johnson, if he's available and willing to do it, it'd be great to see him play in California again.
Mm-hmm. So the Tampa fans who are anxiously awaiting a Steve Spurrier hire, they would have to wait until probably 2021 to hear any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's a contingent. A lot of it is contingent. There's still some, legal wrangling going on behind the scenes in terms of the coaches and money they were owed and all that. And then whether or not they'd want to revisit the XFL. Bob Stoops and obviously Spurrier has hinted towards wanting to return to the wanting to be a part of spring football.
Yeah.
And Spurrier has shown interest. He pushed Stoops in the direction of choosing the XFL a few years back. So it depends. It depends if Mark Trestman wants to return and whether the new head of football operations wants to have Mark Trestman. The head coaches were by and large picked by Oliver Luck and recruited by Oliver Luck. Mm-hmm. So any new commissioner may have a different design on who they want to be coaching these teams. I mean, Luck went to Canada to recruit Mark Trestman after hip surgery. He recruited June Jones heavily, who turned him down initially. Mm-hmm. So Bob Stoops, obviously, Luck using his connections there and sending out feelers to Bob Stoops to get him hired. So Oliver Luck is not part of the equation now. None of these these coaches that I mentioned are under contract with the XFL. So who's to say whether or not a new head of football operations decides to go in a different direction, and who Dwayne Johnson, Redbird Capital, and Danny would be interested in coaching in the league. That remains to be seen. But there's no guarantee that the coaches, the head coaches, or the coaching staffs that were a part of these teams return. Personally, I want June Jones back in the league, but not my call, obviously.
Right. So now that speaking of Danny Garcia and The Rock, it seems like part of what they envision of the XFL that's a lot different from the Vince McMahon, Oliver Luck 2.0 era is that they want a kind of reality TV type show, something like, have you been hearing anything about potential like behind the scenes show or something coming first before the league kind of gets going?
That's the expectation. Everyone I've spoken to is that is that the two biggest ingredients in the new XFL is Danny Garcia and Dwayne Johnson, and the plans they have for the league are very they're multi-layered and complex. They're not looking to just get on the field and play. They want to, the plan that they have for an entire presentation of the league itself is a year-round presentation with content that complements the league. So that's going to mean documentary shows that follow, perhaps, and a lot of people would watch this, follow Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia during all the behind-the-scenes moves they make for the league, as well as the teams and the players and the coaches and everything else. So one of the reasons 2022 is happening, Redbird Capital is certainly a big factor in that in terms of their finances, but one of the main reasons, you could argue the number one reason, is because what Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia have planned is multi-layered and complex and is a huge entertainment element for their rollout of the league. They weren't going to rush into these things, and I think I mentioned in a recent article I wrote on XFL News Hub, The Rock and Danny Garcia, in order for their vision to be realized, they're looking for the right partners that can embrace that vision and also help them execute it. What that means is, looking for someone who's going to buy in completely. Now, what networks that will be, who knows? But as many people know, Danny Garcia has connections to Hollywood and a lot of different networks. And Dwayne Johnson's like an octopus. He's touching everything from NBC to HBO Max. So there's a lot of possibilities for the league, and I definitely think that there's going to, and I know that a big part of the new XFL is going to be in the Hollywood-like presentation of the league.
So that's kind of the new nuance that they're going with. So
right, and it's complicated. That's not an easy thing to pull off. And Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia have shown in the past that a lot of their plans are grand. They don't do things small. For lack of a better term, nothing that they, no endeavors that they encounter or have interest in are half-assed. They go all in. So to simplify it, so that's their plan with the XFL, and that's why 2022 is a much more attainable goal for them accomplishing that vision than a few months, because we're almost in 2021 as we speak. So the league's not ready yet to what they want to do, because they're not looking to do a scaled down league and just rush it out there, play for about 6 weeks and then go home. They want to go all in, and they want to be presenting a fully fledged football league in a different way than we've seen any other sports league.
So what about then, because during the whole process, there was, hey, we could spin this thing back up and a season in a bubble. So did you hear anything of why they said, 2021 is just not going to work? Let's just kick
all
it
of
to
that
2022.
Was discussed, the possibility. All of that was discussed, the possibility of a bubble season. Obviously, there was an initial bubble plan set up for the league prior to the XFL filing for bankruptcy. That a proposal that was made by Sam Schwartzstein, the director of football operations at the time. So the league was looking into the possibility, and the new ownership group looked into all their options as far as 2021 goes. And, it would have been scaled down. You're talking about, from a financial model, too, you're talking about the inability to sell tickets, which is crucial for a league like the XFL. Established leagues like Major League Baseball, the NHL, NFL, and otherwise, they can afford to take the financial hit that they've been taking because of the pandemic. Leagues like the XFL can't afford to have limited ticket sales, limited sponsorships. And then above and beyond that, there are no guarantees that the XFL would even have been able to start off in February, not because they wouldn't have been able to get it together and get everybody in one place and play 6 to 10 weeks or what have you. But there's no guarantee right now, and I'm hoping I'm wrong on this, that the NFL doesn't have some delays.
Yeah, we've seen that this past week.
Yeah, and there's an article I wrote on XFL News Hub back in April, before the league filed for bankruptcy, which was talking about the possibility that the XFL 2021 season would have to be moved back. Potential NFL delays. Now, the NFL has the type of flexibility where they can push back their Super Bowl a month if they have to, and all the networks will go, whatever you want to do, we'll wait for you until you're ready. No one's going to tell the NFL, hey, we've got other things on our TV schedule, so you're just going to have to book it and wait till next year. So in the case of a league like the XFL, you can't ask the networks, hey, I know you have sports programming set up in May, June, July, etc. Can you? But we're having all these issues. Can you wait for us?
Mhm.
So that's kind of the story there. We've seen it right now with the NFL. They've done a very good job considering they're not in a bubble system. But the recent outbreak with the Titans, the uncertainty with tonight's games, the Chiefs and the Patriots because of Cam Newton testing positive, and Jordan Teamo, unfortunately, former Battlehawks quarterback. We've seen the challenges that the NFL is facing, and pretty soon they're going to run out of get out of jail free cards. So what's going to end up happening is they're going to, hopefully this doesn't happen, but there's always a possibility that they'll run out of the type of solutions that they had for the Steelers and Titans by just reworking bye weeks, and they'll have to extend the season or push the playoffs back or make other. So hopefully it doesn't come to all that craziness, but it's a possibility. That would have affected the XFL too if the XFL had set a particular launch date in February, and then all of a sudden the NFL season playoffs are pushed back, and the XFL has nowhere to air their games. So chaotic altogether. So, and just for what the XFL has planned, 2022 makes more sense than 2021 because there's still a lot of uncertainty from the financial end and unfortunately from the public health crisis that we're going through.
Yeah. So do you think Christmas time, I mean, I'm thinking do you think that we'll even start to see maybe season ticket packages for 2022 season, or do you think, I was just thinking, Christmas time is, people are spending money, even though everything is the way it is right now. Do you think they're going to do anything? Or are you basically like everything essentially for the most part is going to be on pause until we get to this June time frame?
Yeah, if you notice, and some people have noticed this on the XFL's website, they've revamped it a little bit, and they're mentioning tickets, obviously the refunds for the 2020 season, and then they're also mentioning the teasing the possibility of tickets going on sale once all plans are set. So I don't know if Christmas or late this year is a hopeful kind of thing. It would be great if the XFL can set that up. That's part of what's going on behind the scenes too. Is part of the legal wrangling is to set up what venues all these teams are going to be playing in. And the 2022 season gives the league the hope that they can have a traditional sports league where there are home and away games, where they can sell tickets, have fan engagement, all that. Hopefully the world gets in a place where that's a reality. So I think it's possible we could get some news on that front in terms of what venues, where the teams are going to play, all that. And that'll help set the stage for ticket sales and everything else. And I think the XFL is already on their website reaching out to the fans to let them know, sign up. We'll let you know in the future. Sign up to our email list, everything else. We'll let you know in the future when these things become available. So work in progress, but they want to head towards that direction. One of the reasons 2022 over 2021 is the possibility of actually having fans at the games, which is, vital for the quality of the league, but also vital for the league's business end.
Yeah, I would love to see what the St. Louis Battlehawks season ticket sales will be like this go round. All right, my final question. Your prediction's sure to go wrong because we always like to do that. Who do you think would be the next commissioner of the XFL?
That is an excellent question. All right. The Washington football team recently hired Jason Wright. And, I had planned on potentially speculating on the future commissioner on the website, but then he was hired by Washington, and he worked with Sam Schwartzstein in the XFL a little bit, counseling, giving advice. He's an excellent hire by Washington. So, but, they could go outside the box and hire somebody like an Amy Trask, who worked with the Raiders. She works with CBS Sports. She's been in an executive role, somebody out there who's forward thinking and football smart. So she could be a possibility. For the sake of this, I'll go with her at the moment because kind of caught me off guard with that, because it's difficult to pinpoint. There are a lot of, I don't know, Bill Polian's game for returning, coming into the fire and doing it again. He was doing a very good job with the Alliance. There are a lot of quality football minds out there and GMs, guys who've been executives who could potentially take on that role. You want the commissioner doesn't have to necessarily be someone with a strong football background as either a player or a GM, but it doesn't hurt.
Look at the NFL. Roger Goodell is a lawyer, and the first person I thought of would be a guy like Eric Moses, but he's left, and he's working now with NASCAR. I was like, that he would have been a good potential fit, working the DC market. And So, I mean, it doesn't, because at first I was like, well, it needs to be a football guy. But then I'm like, well, the NFL didn't. Goodell, and then even I think before him, they were all lawyers before that.
Right. And
So
if you look at
that
Jeffrey
opens,
Pollock's half brother, Gary Bettman, he's more of a business lawyer type, worked with the NBA, and he's with the NHL now. Obviously, NHL did a tremendous job with their bubble and handling of the pandemic, and they just finished their season with the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Stanley Cup. So you don't have to necessarily be like Oliver Luck, who's a former quarterback and executive all over the place. That helped for sure. But it is important, no matter who the head of football is, it's important that all the other departments have people who have strong football experience, whether it be anybody who's in charge of scouting or any of the other different football relations parts of it, obviously the rules, everything else. So it doesn't hurt. Moses would have been a good candidate for sure. He obviously got a very nice job with NASCAR.
yeah, and I need to point out that he didn't leave because everybody got let go.
Right.
Just mean that
exactly.
he found a new job, doing something, that's a big time deal. I mean, because I was even thinking maybe even one of the team presidents as well.
You could former think of team presidents, and if you're thinking about it like a traditional commissioner, and you're looking at obviously Bill Polian was with the AAF, but if you think of a traditional commissioner, there was good GMs in the XFL as well. Randy Mueller with Houston and a few others that I don't know if they'd be up for the task. It's not an easy one, that's for sure. Whoever commits to that type of role is, it full well knows that it's going to be a difficult task, and it's going to have to be someone that, Redbird Capital has a lot of connections in the sports world. So they've worked with Jerry Jones and the New York Yankees and everything else. So, perhaps any head of football hire will come from one of those organizations or teams. So it's people they have familiarity with in terms of sports management, sports business. So, and if it's more of a traditional GM, like I mentioned, Randy Mueller, there's guys like, I don't know if these guys would even consider this stuff, but Scott Paoli's or Mike Tannenbaum's or any of these top football execs or GMs that have experience that have been around the league for 30, 40 years or what have you, that would have an interest in doing it. It's a monumental task, whoever takes on the role. But I do think that the XFL needs to have a very strong football operations department. Obviously, whoever heads that is going to be an important figure in the league's future.
Yeah. I'll throw a name out there. Moose Johnson.
There you go.
Another guy. But
that's
who
terrific.
knows?
That's funny that you mentioned Sunday. I'm watching the Browns-Cowboys game, which, I had a lot of fun watching that. Maybe it wasn't so much fun for our colleague there at XFL News Hub, Jay Noakes. But from a selfish reasons, as an XFL fan, it was fun listening to Moose Johnson and Burkhart call the game, and then Dean Blandino in the studio giving official calls. So it's hard not to think of the XFL there. It was an exciting game. And then for selfish reasons, I also, enjoyed the fact that Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Odell Beckham did real well for my fantasy team in our league. But yeah, Daryl Moose Johnson, to get to your point there, he would be terrific, extremely intelligent. Obviously, have quite the experience that a lot of the other front office people have, but we saw how good of a job he did with San Antonio in the AAF, and then obviously Dallas in the XFL. You couldn't get a better figurehead than him. Such a tremendous speaker, likable, all that. So that's somebody like that would be tremendous as a figurehead of the league for sure.
Yeah, well, we'll see. All right, Mike Mitchell, we appreciate you checking in with us and giving all your insight. I'm sure over the next couple months, we will chat again and figure out, see where things go from here.
Yeah, it should be fun. It should be starts all over again. So it's,
yes,
we're back on that ride again, like we were from 2018 to 2020.
Yeah, I was hoping not to be on that ride, but hey, it gives us more time to work on our fantasy football app and some other things. So I'm like, okay, I'll take it. So thanks again for checking in.
I appreciate it. Thank you. My pleasure.